All right, this looks like it's going to work.
Oh, it says live on YouTube.
It still says it's setting up on my end, but this is promising. I have no idea what live on YouTube looks like. Oh,
We about to learn.
all right. I think that this will work. I'm just going to post on Facebook, friends. Just give me 30 seconds. All right. That is posting to Facebook. Hopefully people will join us over on YouTube. And I think we are ready to get started.
Sounds good.
All right. So welcome everyone. Thank you for bearing with us while we try and figure out new technology things. We tried new tech things last night. Raquel and I tried it and it didn't work. And we're like, that's fine. We'll go back to the old way. We know how that works. Thanks, Zoom. So welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us for Ask a Dietitian tonight. We're here with Brianne Hopkins, our registered dietitian. So I'm Sarah. I use she, her pronouns. I work here at Eating Disorders Nova Scotia, and I will be your host for this evening. So for anyone who doesn't know, Eating Disorders Nova Scotia is a small nonprofit organization in Chibuktuk, Halifax, Nova Scotia, and we're on this call tonight from Mi'kmaq, the ancestral and unceded territory of the Mi'kmaq people. So just a reminder, our programs are pro-recovery spaces. So when you're asking questions or chatting, we ask you to please not share anything that's a measurable, specific, or like number related to eating disorders, as it can be harmful for others. So that includes things like numbers related to like weight or weight change, BMI, calories, like numbers of repetitions, or like length of time without eating, purging, etc. As I mentioned, we are live streaming over YouTube/Facebook. So if you're on Zoom, we ask you to keep your mic muted and your webcam off, and then folks over on Facebook won't see you. And if you have any questions for Brianne, you can send us a DM or just post them in the chat. If you are on YouTube, I truly have no idea what that looks like. I don't know if people can see what you post. So use your discretion. You can send us like a direct message on Instagram or Facebook if you have a question you want answered, because I cannot guarantee that I will see them on YouTube because I have no idea what YouTube Live looks like. I just don't know. That's a problem for another time to try and figure out. So I'm going to pass it over to Brianne, and she can introduce herself and a little bit about the nutrition counseling program. Brianne?
Sure thing. Thanks, Sarah. Hi, everyone. Hopefully everybody's doing okay on this Thursday, kind of gloomy Thursday. I use she, her pronouns. I am a dietitian in Nova Scotia. You may see us called professional dietitians, otherwise known as registered dietitians in different provinces. So same type of thing. We all have the same formal training, and we all write the same exam. It's just about licensing stuff. So I joined the Eating Disorders Nova Scotia team back in February. So it's been a few months now. We've been busy so far, and I just wanted to kind of give a little bit of a blurb about the nutrition counseling, what the, I guess, kind of like details would be. It's one-on-one, and you do not require a formal diagnosis to book an appointment. I think Sarah will probably post some links or maybe discuss it kind of like at the end, how you can book online, but we're all ages. So, well, ages 12 to infinity. So we are pretty open in that sense. And that is because my background is technically in pediatric eating disorders. Primarily, the bulk of my experience has been ages 12 to 25. And then the rest of my experience has been working with adults in just kind of general nutrition. What else am I missing? Yeah, I think that did I get everything on the nutritional counseling? Usually it's I'm like, what am I forgetting? We'll start with kind of an initial assessment type of deal, just so I can kind of get to know you, your story. And then from there, we craft kind of a plan and then work our way forward. So yeah, that's pretty much it.
Perfect.
And people can ask questions about that later too, if you have more questions.
All right. So since it is International No Diet Day, that's why we're here. I thought, Brianne, we should start off by asking, why do you think it's important that we have a no diet day, a day that we just say a big F you to diets?
Well, I was saying this earlier, Sarah, that I think every day should be no diet day. We should always say F you to diets. However, I just think it's important to kind of draw awareness to it in general, right? And even if it takes, it seems like lately everything has a day. So I'm happy that today is no diet day. We'll kind of get into the concept of kind of like non-diet and why diets can be harmful as we go through some of the pre-submitted questions today. I think there was a few questions about that. So overall, it's just kind of raising awareness about how harmful diets really can be for us, just the information that's, put out there and how we retain it. And
so why are diets bad?
Generally, just because they're very restrictive. Like in a lot of cases, it's a lot of telling you like what not to do. And for most people, like it affects the way that they view themselves, and it just totally can damage a relationship with food and really complicate something that is so innate to us. So it really just kind of muddies a lot of waters, basically.
Yeah, and you were talking about like diets or restriction for a lot of people with eating disorders. A lot of eating disorders are based around restrictions. So they kind of sound like they could be really similar.
Exactly. Yeah. And a lot of times, diets are generally kind of like a precursor to developing eating disorders because they start out in kind of a restrictive stage, and then people may experience some change to their body, and then it just can, if you're predisposed to an eating disorder, it's just kind of like lighting a match on, or like lighting a flame to a fire. It just can kind of snowball from there for some folks. But even if not necessarily turning into an eating disorder, it can still be just something that creates a lot of chaos and a lot of just kind of, like I said, just damaging a relationship and making people question every decision about food, which is just complicated overall.
So one of the questions we have is, how do I recognize if something is a diet?
To recognize that something is a diet, usually I always try to say, like, if there's something, if they're talking about taking things away and not really giving alternatives to replace, that would kind of be like red flag number one. That is kind of what makes it a diet. Another thing is if you're finding that you're feeling hungry a lot, it's a diet. If it's categorizing food or like demonizing food, kind of putting it into some foods on a pedestal, so saying some foods are good foods and some foods are bad foods, that's a diet. And if there's a lot of if there's a lot of numbers involved, whether it be, assigning numbers to certain types of foods or talking about kind of like budget numbers and things like that, it's also a diet. So just kind of like things to look for. Also, if they're selling you stuff, also kind of a diet.
So the people giving you health advice probably shouldn't also be selling you the things that will help.
I feel like it's unnecessary. I feel like it's one of those things.
So what you said leads into one of these other questions we have. So someone said, what should I do if I'm hungry, but I just ate?
Mm-hmm. So for this one, because I do get an opportunity to kind of like see some of the questions beforehand. So this one, I have a few options. I would say just eat more, right? Like honor the fact that you are feeling hungry, and trying to kind of let go of the fact that, oh, but I just ate, right? Like, am I doing something bad? And I think that this is something that diet culture really does put into our brains of like, what's wrong with me? Like, I just ate, I should be satisfied. Um, so yeah, I guess just honoring the fact that like maybe you're just still hungry and just eat more, like that can be okay. And then the other part of that spectrum would be to, or like other option is to kind of reflect a little bit on maybe what the day looked like for you. So, did I get enough today? If you think back, yes or no. Um, Maybe like I kind of ate really fast. So, like, first of all, if you didn't eat enough today, that's probably the reason maybe why you're still feeling hungry. Um, and the other option would kind of be thinking about like, did I just eat that meal really quickly? Was I kind of like rushing through that? Maybe I should just pause for a couple seconds, couple minutes to kind of give my body a chance to catch up or my brain a chance to catch up. And then if I'm still feeling this way, if I'm still feeling hungry in say like 15, 20 minutes, I can eat more, right? But just kind of taking a minute to slow down and think, what did the day look like? And then also just kind of like, how did that meal just go? Maybe I'll just give it a couple minutes still to see if I still feel hungry. And if you do, honor that and eat a little more.
So related to that one, what about how would you suggest people deal with food cravings for things that aren't deemed healthy?
Is this a question that somebody just asked?
Yeah.
Sorry, can you repeat it? I need
One
to like
second.
be paying attention to submitted questions because it's the first time I'm hearing them.
How do I deal with food cravings that aren't healthy? I'm putting the quotes on healthy.
Okay. Okay. So how to deal with cravings that aren't healthy. This is diet culture, right? Like that concept of like unhealthy or like that aren't healthy, like really taking a step back and really approaching thinking about the language that we use when it comes to food, like diet culture, whether we kind of like know this or not, until we start thinking about it and questioning it like we're doing here, it really puts foods on a pedestal, right? Like healthy versus unhealthy. And I encourage you all to kind of challenge that mindset and to think a little bit differently about it. So all foods are like food is just food, right? Like food can be healthy. Food is healthy for us, like straight across the board. Even those foods that maybe have been demonized in the past or made to be kind of like a feared food for a person, or just kind of like, you know, previously known as junk foods. That all foods fit. And when we approach food from a different mindset, it can really be helpful in situations such as this one that's been brought up. Because it can sometimes, like if we're giving ourselves permission to be able to have these foods, it can actually substantially lower the amount of cravings that a person may be having or experiencing. The other thing is like, why is it happening? Are you having cravings because you're not getting enough food throughout the day? Right? Like, is your brain and body feeling nourished? Are you including all different food groups like grains and starches or fruits and proteins and fats throughout the day? Because if you're not, there's a good chance that that's increasing the brain's drive for these types of foods, right? And generally, they are foods that are previously known as like not healthy or unhealthy foods, right? Because they taste good, right? And they're satisfying for our brain and body because they give us energy quickly and we enjoy them. So hopefully that kind of answers your question.
All right. Do you have any advice for someone who's looking to ditch dieting? How do you do that?
Educate yourself, right? And learning about how diet culture is affecting your life, different ways that it's like popping its sneaky head in there. I think learning about how it is present in your life is really one way. And then questioning that and challenging that is really kind of like one of the, figuring out where the problem lies is kind of like the only way that we can ever solve problems, right? So that's one thing. And then attending information sessions like this. There's tons of podcasts out there that are kind of coming from like a non-diet, or you may hear another term for it called anti-diet type of approach. And it just kind of sheds a different light on the topic and can really help you to think outside of the box, the traditional like diet culture box. So really start questioning things, right? Questioning this information that's given to us in diet culture, and then applying it to your life. Like that's really how we ditch diets.
It's the hardest part.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So we have a question that says, I'm having a hard time with seeking help because I'm not ready to give up on my attachment to losing weight. Is it possible to recover without weight gain being a part of it?
When your body is being pushed to extremes in order to lose weight, that's an unsafe, unnatural weight for your body to be at. So during recovery, it is necessary to have some weight gain if you have a restrictive eating pattern, because your body is not in a place maybe where it is safe and functioning at its best because of the restrictive eating pattern, right? That's a hard thing to hear, and it can be triggering to hear that, but that's worth maybe having a conversation with somebody to explore that a little bit more. But another thing I invite you to kind of consider is the concept of state, not weight. So this is something that I often talk about with people, is trying to kind of remove the number away from the situation, because we know that the brain always goes there, whether it's eating disorder driven or diet culture driven, or both. And kind of just getting back to basics on your own state. How are you feeling physically? How are you feeling emotionally? How are you feeling mentally? Those things are more important than what any number is saying, right? So really trying to kind of switch the focus and emphasize on that. That would be further conversations with your healthcare team if you're feeling ready to do that. But for the body to really be functioning optimally, it's important that it's at a safe weight, one where it can feel like comfortable and stable, and your brain is getting the nourishment that it needs.
You've talked quite a bit about diet culture. Do you want to just take a second, maybe in case there's anyone who doesn't really know like what diet culture is, to maybe explain what it is and like how it shows up in our lives?
Mm-hmm. So that's a good question, because like I feel like it's just something that, I don't know, I feel like I need to like step back myself and think about, because to me, I don't know, when I'm in this work like every day, it just kind of all blends in. But I feel like diet culture is really kind of like anything to do with diet mentality. So, or if it's selling you products, or basically anywhere along the lines of shrinking your body to give you the promise of feeling healthier or happier or feeling like a better person, or anything that's selling you that like false pretense, is in that world of diet culture. Am I missing something there, Sarah? Like, I don't know, but like, am I allowed to flip this back on you? I feel like this is not the point, but like, I don't know. I think, yeah, if it's really kind of like similar to kind of talking about the diet question that was asked about, like, if it's categorizing food items, if it's applying numbers to things, if it's selling you products and telling you, yeah, shrink yourself to be happier, like that is diet culture.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was thinking. Like anything that tells you that you will be like a better person if you were just like in a smaller body, or if you buy
Mhm.
this shake or whatever it is they're selling. I kind of have a feeling like if they're trying to sell you something like to make you healthy, there's a good chance that that's not founded in science and that it could be diet culture sneaking in.
Right. And then we just wonder, like, does that person have your best interest in mind, or are they trying to make money off of like this mentality that's being
Yeah.
planted in your head?
If it's
Right?
making
Like,
you feel bad about yourself, it's probably not in your best interest.
mhm. Yeah, for sure. How is it
Um,
serving you?
yeah. So, how do you draw the line between like not demonizing or idolizing foods versus giving your body like a balanced nutrient rich meals that are good for you, even if it's like a little bit harder for you to get in? So, like if you'd rather eat like grilled cheese sandwiches every night, like how do you balance? 'Cause probably grilled cheese sandwiches aren't like the most like nutrient dense, fulfilling of all of the foods we could be eating. So, how do you try and balance like that good versus bad?
Um, I feel like it kind of depends on where the person's at, right? Like if that's kind of the only thing that they feel comfortable having for a while, okay, we can make it work, right? Like there's no, with this mindset of kind of like the non-diet approach to including a variety of foods, to basically kind of like normalize eating. I think it's even just getting past that hurdle of like grilled cheese sandwiches are bad. I can't eat them every day. Because really, in my mind, they're actually quite balanced. They contain protein, they contain 2 grains and starches, which is awesome, and some added fats, which we need. So it's including a variety of food groups, right? It's our brain that's stuck in that mindset of like, oh, it's got to be bad, because it contains cheese and bread. That's diet culture. Okay. That's a great example of diet culture. Because oftentimes in certain diets, they're telling you to eliminate food groups, right? Or eliminate certain food items, or saying that certain foods are better than others. But when you kind of approach it from a different lens, we're looking at more so of like, how do we include variety, right? Eventually, once a person feels more ready to branch out and try different food items, so switching it up and maybe, including more variety in their life because maybe they're kind of going to burn out of grilled cheese sandwiches. Then we try something else, right? But if grilled cheese sandwiches feels like the safest option for a while, okay, right? Like we can work with that.
Yeah, like I can speak personally that like when I was first starting my recovery, I ate a lot of chips because it was something that I could very easily get in at the end of the night.
Mhm.
And then after doing that, I don't know how long I did that, but I still have half of a Costco size bag in my cupboard because I was like, you know what? I really don't want these anymore. Like I know I can eat them. I don't feel
Mhm.
badly about eating them, but I don't want them anymore. And probably I
Mhm.
should throw them out because I think they've been sitting in there long enough. They're probably not even good anymore.
They might be stale. They could be stale. Yeah, and I think like there's something to be said for when we make room for allowing these types of foods that have been demonized in the past or have been kind of like, whatever diet culture terminology we want to use, like cheat foods or that kind of thing. Um, when we make room for them in our everyday and give ourselves permission to include them often, they lose their luster, right? Like they kind of aren't romanticized anymore. They're just become normal, and normal can sometimes be boring, right? Like they just kind of lose that charm, which is a hard thing for people to kind of get to that place. And for many people, it kind of just seems like it feels unattainable for them because they've had such a damaged relationship with that food item before, or maybe there's a lot of mistrust around it. Like if they've, overate on it or binged on it before, that creates that kind of like mistrust between a type of food. But that takes time to learn, and it takes maybe some support to help with that. To really kind of build your confidence back around certain types of foods that have been avoided in the past or kind of demonized in the past.
Yeah. So we have a question. It's what's like the difference between a dietitian and a nutritionist? Are they the same? Are they interchangeable? What's going on there?
That is a good question. So technically here in Nova Scotia, so a dietitian is a protected title. Okay. So actually all over Canada, really, the term dietitian is a protected title, meaning that somebody who takes a nutrition course, like just kind of, a weekend nutrition course, they cannot call themselves a dietitian. They'll get fined. for doing that. So that is kind of like the dietitian is the food information professional, like gold standard. A nutritionist, so within many provinces as well, you'll also hear the term nutritionist. That one's a tough one because, say, an example here within our healthcare system in Nova Scotia is that the public health nutritionists, they are technically dietitians, but their title within the Nova Scotia Health Authority is public health nutritionist. That's just to make things confusing, I think. I don't really know why. I'm not really sure why that is, because in a sense, like technically, as far as I know, maybe nutritionist is a protected title. I kind of forget now because I don't call myself that. But I was under the understanding, and I am under the impression that really like anybody who has a vested interest in like nutrition, like, so say, for example, that like weekend course person can call themselves a nutritionist. So that's where it kind of gets like a little bit complicated. And I would just say to kind of watch for that if you guys are looking to connect with a dietitian or somebody to talk to about food, because there may be some people who are more qualified than others. So I would say like look for a dietitian as opposed to kind of general nutritionist or nutrition expert or nutrition coach. If you see those ones, generally that's not somebody who received an undergraduate degree in nutrition and did the separate internship that we do and the licensing exam and that kind of thing. So that's kind of some of the major differences. But if you hear public health nutritionist, that is a qualified dietitian.
Of course, why not?
I know. Just to muddy the waters, make it easier.
So this question is about like weighing yourself. Is there any like would you find it useful for people to be weighing themselves? And if they were going to, what would be like a safe or healthy way for people to weigh themselves?
This one again is kind of like depends on the individual person's journey, because there are many people out there within the general population that never weigh themselves. They don't take their weight and don't know what it is, and they live long and healthy, happy lives, right? Like they don't know the number. That also exists for people who have had a history of eating disorders in their past, or maybe living with an eating disorder or disordered eating patterns, or anybody kind of feeling somewhat entrenched in diet culture, and they've just kind of created that boundary for themselves that the number doesn't, they're not interested in the number anymore. Then that's okay. You don't have to know the number, period. So there are ways to protect yourself from that, such as, if you're going to the doctor, just ask them to not share the number with you or ask them to stand backwards on the scale, so that you don't see it, just to protect yourself if you need that. For other folks, like if numbers are very much like kind of entrenched in the thoughts and the weight seems to dictate a lot of thoughts, and then I would say that's worth a different conversation. Like sometimes it can be a therapeutic element to do weights and talk about it with your team, because it can be helpful just to kind of reflect on what's going on there. And sometimes like full avoidance of a number isn't always helpful either. It really kind of like depends, like I'm giving you all the scenarios here. For some people, sometimes people may need to be able to see the number and just kind of like be okay with it. And that takes work to be able to get to that point, because maybe they forget to ask and they hear the doctor say it, and how is that going to affect that person, right? Like, could you hear the number and not have your world come crashing down? Like that is ultimately kind of what it comes down to. So really that's worth a conversation with your team and just kind of knowing where you're at and how much that number is kind of dictating the choices that are, or like dictating what's happening, the action, I guess. Yeah.
So related to that, what about counting calories? Is there any way that you can see that being beneficial, or is it like a hard no?
Hard no. Because here's my analogy. You're doing a disservice to your body by just picking arbitrarily a number to use. Contrary, so that this is a great example of diet culture, right? They'll give you a number and say, like, this is enough for you today and every day for maybe the rest of your life. And really, like, who knows how much energy you need in a day? That's what a calorie is. It's a unit of energy. Okay. So our bodies are all different. So we all need different amounts of energy to function. And day by day, the amount of energy that we need is different. So we compare this to like your house. Okay. So a unit of energy. So whatever they measure energy in your house, kilowatts, something like that.
Sure.
Sure. Sounds good. I'm not a sciencey person, really.
Just food science.
Just food. Yeah. Anything, that kind of thing. Not electricity. So think about your house. Like some days, there are days where your home uses more energy than others, right? Like, and there's a lot of factors that involve that. So the temperature outside would be one of them, or how many people are in your home for that day. That's another one. Or how many lights you have on, what appliances you're using. So many factors, right? Like there's a lot of things that dictate that. Some days may require less energy because maybe nobody's home at nighttime, so you need less lights. Or maybe everybody's home, you need all the lights, you know? So it really kind of depends. So if we kind of put our bodies in that same position, there are some days where our bodies require more than others. So to say that you just need one set number is really just doing a disservice to you. Our temperatures fluctuate. Our demand is different on different days, right? If we're doing movement beyond our normal, that requires more energy. If we're having kind of like, you know, if you're feeling down one day or kind of like your mental health is not good. I mean, we're all in a pandemic right now. We're all doing the best that we can to survive. And like, there are days where we need more energy right now because let's face it, like being in a, you know, if your mood is down, that takes energy. If you're feeling anxious, that takes energy. If you're feeling depressed, that takes energy. It might not feel like you are expending a lot because you're not like running 6 kilometers, but like it or not, that's why your body feels tired, right? Like having these emotions is hard. So you need to make sure that you're fueling your brain and body and for that. So yes, that's my long-winded answer of saying like, you can't pick a number and that be the number for every day. It is just like, it's not fair to your body. Your body has different demands every single day. So hopefully that answered the question.
Yeah, I think you can end up like in a cycle that way, being like, oh, well, I hit the number that I was supposed to hit today. So it doesn't matter that my body's telling me that I'm still hungry because check mark, I get the
Right.
number on this, or not the number on the scale, like my fitness pal or whatever.
Yes. Yeah. And that great point. So really that like a number does not dictate your level of satisfaction either. So what I mean by that is like, it doesn't dictate your fullness. So just because say you consumed all of your energy intake for the day, like in the first part of your day, you're going to be hungry later because that's how our bodies work, right? Like, but you don't feel physically hungry, you might be mentally hungry later. So yeah, it's not really gonna like on your note, like it's not really a good indicator of what your body actually needs. Like it's literally kind of like an arbitrary number. It has nothing to do with like satisfaction of your body. There is calculations and things like that, you know, like trust me, I learned all about it in school. But you know, when you actually have conversations with people, like just because that number is something that was calculated for you doesn't mean that it is what actually fuels you and satisfies you.
We have a follow-up to that. So what about counting calories to make sure you're getting enough? So like using it as like, I guess it's like a minimum, like a baseline, like you need to get this number in.
Right. So I would say Yeah, it's kind of on an individual basis in some capacity again. Generally, I like people to get away from numbers because especially if there's some sort of like, if there's always been an attachment to numbers, whether it just kind of be the diet culture, like diet embedded numbers in your brain because they're like lyrics to a song that you don't really like, and then you hear it on the radio and you sing every word. It's like that. So um, yeah, I still try to kind of like encourage getting away from that and shifting it a little bit more to like, are we getting all the food groups? Like, what nutrients are you missing throughout your day? I hardly get any foods that contain calcium. That's like one thing I'm majorly missing. So maybe how do I incorporate some dairy or dairy alternatives throughout my day? That's something that's missing. Or thanks to diet culture, I've, not been eating enough grains and starches. Like there's some fear around eating grains and starches. So I know that that's something missing. So we're removing the number away from it. We're kind of just focusing more on particular like food groups, I guess, more so, and like what is actually missing in terms of variety and specific nutrients.
Yeah, that totally makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
So someone wants to know, like, what is considered like a clean food?
I don't know. One that is washed, I'm not sure. So that is, it's a diet culture term, right? What clean food actually is like. I don't even think I want to engage in that because I think it's just gonna kind of like give some mixed messaging perhaps. But yeah, I think really like at the end of the day, if we hear concepts of like clean versus what is the opposite of clean in the diet culture world, I don't know.
I don't think there is one. It's just clean. And if it's not
Dirty.
clean, I guess it's bad.
Yeah, I don't know. So yeah, I think just kind of like if you hear these words pop up, these buzzwords, it's like boop, pause. Like why is my brain going there? Right? Like how can I reframe that and just kind of thinking about food as just food, right? Like there's no one food that is better than another. Foods are all good for us for different reasons, whether it's vegetables or whether it's chips. Like they all have a reason, they all have a purpose. And um, yeah, I think the main thing is like interrupting thoughts like that. Yeah.
So would superfoods kind of fall into that same? I haven't heard any buzz around superfoods recently, but I know for a while there was all of that. I don't even
Yeah.
remember what they are, like ridiculous things that you can't even find like at a grocery store. So
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah, same thing, because that's also just kind of like glamorizing certain types of foods and just saying that they're a lot better, just exactly like the clean foods, saying that they're like the best, safest, healthiest option, and just kind of like putting them up on this pedestal compared to anything else. So if you eat anything that's not on this pedestal and is not a superfood, you've done bad, right? And that just kind of perpetuates that whole cycle. And you don't want to hear my interpretation of a superfood?
Always.
Cheese. I think cheese is a superfood because it fits in like 3 different food groups categories, and it doesn't get much better than that.
Amazing.
There you
You
go.
can use it in so many different ways. There's so many different
I
types
know.
of cheese.
So versatile, so
Even
many
if you're lactose
options.
intolerant, people still seem to get for they still go for the cheese. And now
I
they have like
know.
options. It,
Exactly. Yeah.
it is a
Yeah.
superfood. I agree.
There you go. If we have to still use that terminology, let's flip it to our advantage.
Do you have any tips for building self-compassion during recovery?
Um, I do. I was actually just like looking over, and that's the question that kind of caught my eye. First of all, like learn what self-compassion means. Like that's one thing. Um, and then continue repeating thoughts of self-compassion, even when you're like that bully that's going on in your brain and saying all these mean thoughts, even if it doesn't believe them right away. So examples of what self-compassion could be. So say, for example, you're trying something, say you're trying to bring in like chips because you've had rules against chips and you wouldn't, chips is like a common theme. It seems like I want chips or something. I don't know.
Sorry.
Yeah. So if you're trying to like build some trust around chips again, and you have some chips and maybe you end up eating more than what you felt comfortable having, and you're feeling a little distress around that. Um, practicing from a lens of self-compassion, or approaching it from a lens of self-compassion, would be something like, I'm learning, right? Like I've had years of avoiding these foods, and I'm learning to build trust with myself again. This is hard. It's going to take some time because my relationship with these chips has been damaged for years. So I can't expect things to change overnight, right? Like these are all kind of like different examples of a way to approach the situation from a lens of self-compassion. And it's really about practicing, because we're not, I don't know, this is kind of like a sad thing to say, but I think we're not really great at being nice to ourselves. It seems like it's more work, but we're really good at being mean to ourselves. So it just takes some time, right? To kind of like literally flip the script and practice. And event at the beginning, maybe it'll be hard to believe what it is that you're saying, but with time and the more you practice, it'll just kind of come a little bit more naturally. And yeah, self-compassion is essentially like forgiveness.
Yeah, I
So
think we tell people like a lot, your eating disorder didn't start overnight. That's not quite right. But you know where I'm going with this. Like your
yeah,
eating disorder didn't develop overnight. Like you're not going to get rid of it overnight. It is going to be hard. And sometimes that really sucks. Like it does.
yeah,
But being able to like give yourself that self-compassion and recognize that you are making changes, it's an
yeah,
important part.
100%. Yeah, well said. And just kind of like, don't give up. It's never, recovery is never like a linear process. It's never just going to go like from here to here without all of this in between. So I think that's something to remember, is setting like realistic expectations for yourself. And when there's a slip up, because inevitably, like we're all human and it happens, um, expect it and just kind of like be okay with it, right? And just kind of like learn from that experience and use it to help fuel you to move on, right? And move forward.
Yeah, and also remember it's a global pandemic right now, so like things are a little more wild than usual. So your eating
Mhm.
disorder recovery is probably going to be a little bit more challenging. You
Yeah,
balance everything else that's happening in the world right now.
right. Yeah. And be kind to yourself, because yeah, we're all learning how to live life. And for those in recovery, doing life and recovery through a pandemic is extremely challenging. So,
Yeah. Um, how does someone who is like a vegetarian or vegan, how can that work with recovery?
um, so good news is that there's lots of options, because I think like it's kind of like the whole gluten-free thing. It just kind of seems to have grown legs, which is great for the celiac population, because
Mhm.
there's way more options available. So same kind of thing when it comes to like vegetarian or vegan. There's a lot more options available to be able to get protein sources and things like that. So it's getting a little creative, maybe. And I do, so there are ways that we can work with it. Vegan diet, however, can be complicated, because there is it is hard to get all of the nutrients that you're, not impossible because people do it, to get all of the nutrients that your body requires just through food alone. And if a person is living with a more restrictive eating disorder, can sometimes, it means that you need more of things. And for some folks who are, dealing with a more restrictive disordered eating pattern, it can be hard to it is hard to add more, right? So to add more makes it even harder. Um, like I said, not impossible. There are ways around it, or ways to work through it, but that's just something to consider. Another thing that I always kind of leave people to ponder, but ultimately, like, your choice is your choice, and that's okay. Just something to think about of like, why? Like, what are your reasons why? And if the thoughts kind of came up as being because it's healthier or because that disordered eating kind of bully voice told you it would be a good idea, it started out as kind of like a diet or a way to maybe lose weight, then maybe those things are worth questioning, right? And maybe we have that conversation around bending a little in some ways if a person's like ready for that and recognizes that a vegetarian diet or vegan diet is following more a choice that they didn't make specifically, maybe more that like their disordered eating thoughts made for them, then that could be something that a dietitian could support you with, kind of reintroducing some animal-based proteins or animal-based products back into your life. But that's conversation with your provider, really. But that's just throwing that out there.
Perfect. Let me see what else we've got here. So what is considered like normal eating? Like for someone who has had disordered eating behaviors for a while, I think for some folks, it can be really hard to remember, like, what did it look like when I didn't have this eating disorder? Do you have any suggestions of like, what does that look like? What is normal?
Yeah. A good way to kind of gauge what normal is basically like eating what you want, when you want, with who you want, however you want, that kind of thing, and not having any strings attached to it. That is kind of like all encompassing, a very like loosey-goosey way of saying what normal eating could look like. And also recognizing the fact that like it's okay to sometimes eat past fullness, and it's okay, like this is when a person is in like this intuitive space, or really kind of work through eating disorder recovery, maybe more so, but some, and not so eating a little past fullness because the food just tastes good and you want a couple extra bites, and that's okay. And then sometimes maybe because you got a little busy, so we waited an extra 30 minutes before eating your next meal, so getting a little extra hungry, that can be normal too when it comes to normal eating. Yeah, so not being regimented basically is what it comes down to.
Yeah. And for folks that are just starting to like normalize that eating process, do you have any suggestions of like how to make that more comfortable? I know that might probably will vary depending on the person and their behaviors, but like how do you make normal eating feel more normal, I guess, like when you're going through the actual motions of like cooking that food and then sitting down to eat?
Practice, right? Like, and really kind of, so for some folks, yeah, it's a whole, it kind of, yeah, like you said, it depends on where the person's at in their recovery journey. Generally it starts with kind of like eating consistently, which you may hear some words about, like mechanical eating. That's kind of like the fancy word for it. So eating consistently, and maybe just including foods that you feel comfortable with at first, and then working with your team to focus on exposure to foods that have been avoided, and starting with ones like least scary, and then working your way up as you build confidence, so that we can normalize those food items again. And so food items and food situations. So that would be to your point about like cooking food, like that would be an exposure in itself, right? And kind of like getting comfortable and building comfort with doing that part with the cooking process. So takes time. It's kind of like a step-by-step thing. And the beauty is that when you don't really, I mean, it's great to remember kind of like what life was like before those disordered eating thoughts kind of took over, because then you have a benchmark. But the beauty about not knowing is that you get to create your own destiny and you get to determine, like, no matter what, you create your own destiny in this sense, but you get to decide what you want it to look like. And like, if you had a magic wand and could be over there, like, what would that look like? That's the plan, right? Like, that's what we work towards. So,
Awesome.
yeah.
All right. I'm just looking at the time. Probably will just do one more question. So I have a loaded question for you, Brianne. What's
Oh,
the best advice that you
oh
could give
God.
someone? What's your best tip, best piece of advice for someone navigating like diet culture, dieting, eating disorder behaviors, recovery? What do you got?
I guess like with diet culture, I guess in any aspect, it's questioning things that don't feel right, that just don't feel good to you. If it's kind of like, yeah, if it's standing out as being like, should I do this? Shouldn't do this? I've done this several times. Like, why isn't it working? Things like that are kind of like making you question, like, what's happening here? Am I the problem? Like, pause and start to question everything else instead of yourself, for a minute. And so that'd be one thing. The other thing is when we talked about self-compassion, like that is one of like the major like conversations that I have with people throughout this whole process about ditching diet culture or throughout eating disorder recovery, is just that whole element of self-compassion that like you're learning. It's going to take some time. Um, Allow yourself to make mistakes as much as we don't like it sometimes. Perfect doesn't exist. And trying to break that cycle of like all or nothing thinking. And I guess when it comes to those who are kind of like on the fence about, talking to somebody about their relationship to food, it can be a super hard step to do that. And I think like one thing would be do your research on who you think would be a good fit for you to connect with. And, most people offer some information about like the services that they offer. And some folks would even kind of like do a call to see if it's a good fit. So do some research on kind of like who feels good to you that you connect with. Because I think it's really important that you connect with any clinician that you're seeing, whether it's somebody for therapy, for counseling, or a dietitian. So being assertive and just kind of like knowing who you click with, I think that that's important process. And giving yourself a chance, basically, of knowing that like you deserve to be having a conversation like this, and you deserve to be giving yourself your own attention and your own focus and your own energy and helping to get your life back.
Yeah. Bravo. Great answer.
Thanks.
And I didn't even prep her for that one.
That one's
So,
just to my core.
so I did throw in the chat, both here on Zoom and on Facebook, the link if you're interested in learning more about working with Brianne. Just a reminder, in case you don't see it in there, it is only for folks that are living in Nova Scotia at this point. But the information is there if you want to learn more. If you were like, cool, she's great, I want to book my appointment, the link is there as well. And I'm totally going to shamelessly plug a Mother's Day inspired raffle basket. We're drawing that on Saturday. So tomorrow is your last day to get tickets. They're just $3 each. So the link for that as well is there as well. The basket's valued at over $800 and it's just sitting here beside me and it's huge and it's lovely. So it would be great to give to yourself, or if you're gonna maybe see your mom. Who knows? Nova Scotia's a little crazy right now. Don't do anything unsafe. But you can hold on to it. There's nothing perishable in there. You could give it to someone at another time when it's a little bit more COVID friendly to do so. So Brianne, unless you have anything else, I want to thank everyone for joining us tonight and like searching
Thanks,
for
everyone.
us and finding us when we weren't on Facebook the way that we said we would be, and then switch to YouTube. And for anyone that was logged in when we were going through all that trying to find it, we really appreciate your
Thanks for hanging on for the ride. And
Bye,
yeah, thank you
everyone.
all for being here and sharing your time with us. Appreciate it.
Have a good night, everyone. Stay safe. Wash your hands. We'll see you another time. Bye.
Bye.